Betrayal, lies, deception, romance, children through the lens of astrology. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. The Synastry broke my heart. Shell shocking. Death in the chart, lies and deception. I want people to see this. You are not going to believe what you're about to see, and you are going to learn so much. Hi, my friends, it's Meredith, your evolutionary astrologer. I'm really excited to bring you this super deep video today. We're going to talk about murder, love, betrayal, lies, deception, and I'm going to show it to you in the charts, how you can find these things. And I'm going to show you this in Synastry. I'm going to show you a death chart in Synastry to a natal chart. And we are going to go in and look at the execution by beheading of Anne Boleyn, directed from King Henry VIII, her husband. It is absolutely disgusting. I don't know if you guys have ever visited the Tower of London. I have. And my heart just broke standing there. It's like I could feel the energy. What I did in this video is I decided to have you look at King Henry VIII's birth chart and Anne Boleyn's birth chart. I cannot wait to show you. Okay, the whole reason why I even wanted to do this video for you is I was just out of curiosity looking at their relationship. I wanted to see if I could see death in the chart, which you clearly can. I wanted to see if I could see lies and deception. And I actually wanted to see if you could find love in the chart. Now, we know that Anne Boleyn gave us Queen Elizabeth. That changed the entire world. Her child was the most probably influential and powerful thing in her life. She was only queen for 3 years before she was beheaded. I want to show you her death chart, and I want to show you why composite charts are so important. You are not going to believe what you're about to see, and you are going to learn so much. So it's hard for me to sort of celebrate this kind of thing because I think it is tragic and it actually hurts my heart. King Henry VIII was truly a monster. He was arrogant and insecure, and he was a bratty little boy his whole life. I toured his summer house in Kingston, I believe it is, and I ran through Anne Boleyn's hedge maze, and it made me really happy. Anne is controversial, but I also want to say that my data might not be perfectly accurate because they didn't keep good records. And we have the Julian calendar switching into the Gregorian calendar. We have time calculated differently. So my dates, times, and hours could be wrong. I did do a little bit of research. I'm going with this gentleman who pitches the case for Anne Boleyn being born in 1507. You have to realize that the Julian calendar dates are different, and I have converted them into the new calendar. I find the dates that I have used very compelling and very interesting, and I will link my source in the notes below. But come with me on this journey because it's absolutely shell-shocking, horrifying. It is eye-opening. It is so unbelievable. Astrology and looking at murder, love, betrayal, lies, deception, romance, children through the lens of astrology is so eye-opening. And in this case, it is so jaw-dropping. I had to pick my jaw up off the floor. And then I said to myself, oh my God, I want to teach this. I want people to see this. So come along with me on this Anne Boleyn, King Henry VIII astrological look into their compatibility, and you might just die right along with me while we take a look at this. Here we go. Okay, I know you're not even ready for this. Anne Boleyn's natal chart. So here she is, May 15th. 1507. Now, in the Julian calendar, she's born on Cinco de Mayo, actually, May 5th, but it converts to this. So let's just go with it. One of the quick things that I just want to show you, she was drop dead gorgeous. She was also considered a little bit arrogant, and she is a Leo rising, and she does have Jupiter in Libra, and she has her sun in Taurus. So the sun in the 10th house is the ruler of her chart, which is this earthbound beauty. We know that she loved the gardens and she loved the outdoors. We also know that she loved the arts, and we know that she was drop dead gorgeous. I think it's interesting that she has this gargantuan Jupiter in Libra in the second house, which is Venus's other house. And she has her sun sitting right there at the top of the chart, 23 degrees. She was like breathtakingly beautiful. And if she did have a Pisces moon, that would be the arts. That would be more of loving the arts. So this is a very creative person and an artistic chart. I also want to tell you that she was born with a sixth finger, and that's why they thought she was a witch. What is interesting about that is that she has Chiron and Virgo in the first house, and most of her first house is Virgo. So she was very, very bright, and she has, look at that, Mercury and Gemini. And I think she spoke numerous languages. She wore those long sleeves that covered her hands because she was very self-conscious of that extra little pinky finger that she had. And I just find that to be very fascinating because she has Chiron in the first. And I hope you guys watched my Chiron video where I talked a lot about when you have Chiron in the first, oftentimes you have a feeling that you're ugly or you're not right or your wound can feel physical. And I do think that that was a wound of hers. I think that made her very insecure. And I hope you guys also watched my Virgo rising video, even if you're not a Virgo or a Virgo rising. That was a really hard video to do. Virgo rising can be a very tough placement because you also are born with insecurities, feeling not perfect enough. And so while she might have been quite confident or had an air of regality and confidence with that Leo rising, you can see that her first house has a tremendous amount of Virgo. And I do think that that kept her humble. So one of the things I want to say is that I'm not a historian, I'm not an expert, but I am a pretty decent astrologer. And I found these charts so interesting. And what I want you to get out of them is I want you to start being able to read your own chart quite like this. Anne was executed. A lot of historians believe she was framed. And King Henry VIII said that she was an adulterer and she slept with her brother and she slept with the page or the servant who took care of his golden toilet, that she had a romantic affair. Now, do I see a lot of deception in Anne Boleyn's chart? To tell you the truth, no, I don't. I see an extraordinarily strong female, probably a little bit ahead of her time with that Mercury in Gemini. She had a gift for communication, probably for writing, probably a brilliant communicator. I think she loved poetry. And she probably, with an Aries Venus and Leo rising, did not filter her thoughts that well. I think she might have also been a little too strong. North Node in Capricorn. She was embracing a leadership quality, if you will. Moon in Pisces. Maybe she was a witch. Maybe she did practice witchcraft and magic. I think she did. She was ahead of her time and she was just extraordinarily beautiful. And I think a lot of people were probably jealous of her, including her husband. Let's go look at King Henry VIII. So again, this is July 7th. He was born in June 28th, but with the calendar change, it bounces it to July. Now, I find this interesting. Virgo rising with Mars in the first house. Mars in the first house can be utterly, absolutely brutal. It can be really, really cruel when it is not well developed. When it goes south, that is your passion, that is your energy, that's your animation, but it is also how you could kill someone because it is the slicing off, if you will. And his preference was beheading, which I find it interesting because the first house is the house of Aries and it rules the head. Yes, I cannot make this stuff up. I found this to be very interesting. It's also in a very interesting aspect to Neptune. So he could kill for absolutely no good reason at all, just on a whim. He's delusional. Neptune is opposing Jupiter, and Jupiter is his belief system. He has this all in conflict, his belief system, right? So when you don't believe what he is communicating, Jupiter in the 10th house, I also find Jupiter in Gemini, when it is unhealthy, is just a complete know-it-all. I mean, they just know everything. They've got every, fun fact and not so fun fact on every single thing. That is in a square aspect to Mars, which is very, very interesting. I also think that this Saturn opposing his Mercury made him quite a cruel man, made him say very cruel things where you even wondered if he had a heart. I don't think he was very developed. I think he was an infantile little boy, a 4-year-old brat. And when cancer goes wrong, so I think this guy was just so unhealthy. When cancer goes wrong, it stays a perpetual spoiled little kid. Something went wrong with his mother. So here's his mother with an Aries moon in an exact square to his son. So he just did not feel the love. And also, that's in the 8th house. One of the things that is really interesting, and again, this was just jaw-dropping to me, is his mother's name was Elizabeth of York, and I guess she died when he was a very little boy. And so here is the square, and here is the moon in the 8th house, death of moon, mother, very interesting. Saturn is retrograde. So whenever I see Saturn in retrograde, there's oftentimes a missing father. Saturn is in the 5th house, and the 5th house is oftentimes considered a father house along with the 10th. I read the 10th house a little bit more as the house of father than the 5th house, but a lot of traditional astrologers felt that the 5th house was the house of the father. And here we have a Saturn retrograde. So a missing father and then the death of the mother. And the mother did in fact die at a really young age. So what happened to King Henry VIII's father? And why is this important? Well, I think that this is why his growth was stunted. I have a feeling those people who took care of him didn't want to disrupt him any further because he had already suffered so much in his life. His dad died when he was 17 years old. So May is a tough month for him. That is when his father died, and that is his south node. So his chart is just plagued with difficulty. He has a 29-degree nodal axis. And I hope you guys watched my video called The Critical Degrees 0, 15, and 29 degrees. Also, in my Seattle workshop, I am going to film that. So if you weren't able to get a ticket, it did sell out. I'm so excited. You will be able to buy the workshop, and I'm going to be talking about all of the different degrees in astrology because each degree means something. And so we're going to go deep into the different degrees. Look at his Venus at 0 degrees Gemini. That's like an insatiable appetite. And he was the philanderer. And don't you guys always think that the cheater person is the one that accuses the partner of cheating when they're the cheater? Yeah, he has Venus and Gemini at 0 degrees. And Gemini likes exploring options. And so I think he had a lot of options. And I actually think he was quite unfaithful. And I think he was the unfaithful one. I don't think Anne Boleyn, if she did cheat, I think she was wise enough to be very discreet about it. But I do feel that she was framed. That's my opinion. That 29 degrees south node in Taurus in the 9th house is pure gluttony. And when I went to his summer home at Hampton Court Palace, I took a tour of the kitchen and they showed us what an evening's meal would be. And I am telling you, an evening's meal, like a Tuesday night meal for King Henry VIII, was literally more food than my Thanksgiving dinner. A whole goose, a whole duck, a whole turkey. The leg bones, the thigh bones, the drumsticks were like this big. He has this south node of Taurus, love for food, in this crisis degree, 29 degrees, in the house of massive gluttony. The 9th house is ruled by Jupiter. And so it just can't get enough. It's just like, cannot get enough nuts for that guy. Let's put the two together and stick with me because their synastry is actually quite sad. The synastry broke my heart. Why did Anne Boleyn, or Anne Boleyn's dad, who married her off to King Henry VIII, not have an astrologer? It breaks my heart because I would have told her, I don't care who this dude is that you think is going to advance your life. Do not marry this man. Save yourself and do not marry him. And I'll show you why. Now, again, my times might not be exactly perfect, but let's just look at this. So we have her on the middle and then we have him on the outside. Now, one of the things that is really, really interesting is we have his moon on her Venus. So he was very attracted to her and he clearly fell in love with her beauty. Literally loved her beauty. And there it is in the 8th house of sexuality. You know me well enough. Hopefully you've watched all my videos and hopefully you've been learning real astrology, deep astrology. And you guys know that we don't do sun sign astrology. And if we just did sun sign astrology, you would know from my Cancer soulmate stalemate video that Cancer Taurus is one of my very favorite hands down combinations out of all of the pairs in the zodiac. But in this case, I would say no, no, and no. Look at this. They both are. Are you ready for this? You are not ready for this, but I hope you guys can see it. They are both each other's south node. So his south node at 29 degrees Taurus sits on her sun at 23 degrees Taurus. His 14 degree Cancer sun sits on her 23 degree south node. I also find it very, very interesting that both her sun and her south node sit at 23 degrees. It's almost like her soul incarnated for this fate. And she couldn't escape it. And I think she tried to escape it. And had she married for love, not for family, obligation, responsibility, duty, or ego, or status, had she been able to step into her she was a very creative person and a very smart person. And I think she had a true love prior to King Henry VIII. And she didn't get to marry him. But had she gotten to marry for fifth house reasons, for love and romance and joy and creativity, I think it would have saved her life. Like, had she been able to just marry for love. And I think that was a calling of hers that she just didn't get to experience. She sacrificed herself for, truthfully, the world. I think he ended up beheading her because he had a fancy for another woman, the next wife, and he wanted a boy. And she had given birth to Elizabeth, and he didn't want a girl. Girls were useless. Ha, ha, ha. Little did he know that Queen Elizabeth was going to become one of the most profound and powerful rulers of the entire world. And she was a genius herself. I have a video for members only called Golden Linkages. And I talk very deeply about what happens when you marry your south node. Now, not everybody is going to die by death if you marry your south node, and they both married their south nodes. So that was just, it proved to be too difficult to do. And with his 0 degree Venus Gemini conjunct his 29 degree Taurus south node, he was a jealous freakazoid. That is unhealthy, jealous attachments, probably just a stubborn know-it-all. Her south node is kind of lonely all by itself, and it is in a square to Venus at 9 degrees. And that Venus is in the 8th house, and it's in Aries, which represents the head, which is a death by the head. Uranus there, a shocking death by the head, and that is in square to her nodal axis, and it is square to her Cancer south node. She just may not have been able to overcome it. So I thought this was shell-shocking. Now what I'm going to do for you, and this is the reason why I wanted to do a whole entire composite series, and I put the composite chart. I put their composite chart together for you to see it. Just sort of unbelievable again. Like, I thought this was really unbelievable. And there's a lot more to look at. This isn't a full reading. This is just giving you tidbits on what to look for. Her beauty is what gave her so much power. It did her in with her Mercury, but look at her power, Pluto power right here in Sagittarius. And it's in a perfect trine to her Venus, and it's in a harmonious aspect to her Leo rising. So her beauty was her power, and her knowledge too. But her knowledge, her mind got her into trouble because that Mercury opposes Pluto. So she was too blunt. She told the truth. Like, she was too truthful. It didn't help her. I think she really was unfiltered. I hope you guys like this. By the way, I just want to say my Seattle workshop has sold out, but I am going to sell tickets in May for my Barcelona workshop, which is going to take place this October 10th through the 13th in Barcelona, Spain. And if you guys want more details, I don't have all of my curriculum figured out, but one thing you guys all voted on in the community tab, I mean, it was just hands down the runaway winner. Everybody wants to explore death in the chart and figuring out how to read death in the chart. And so that kind of also inspired me in doing this video for you so you can see it. So I am going to do death, and I think I'm going to do dating your moon, which is really fascinating because ultimately at the end of the day, we do date our moon. And then I am choosing my third curriculum, and I might do a day full of readings, just cold readings, or a half day. So I might put a little bit more energy into that. But if you want want to get tickets, keep in mind that they're going to go on sale on Tuesday, May 21st, and I only have room for 30 people. So in Seattle, I have room for 50, but in Barcelona, it's a little bit more intimate of a gathering. It's a little bit more of a smaller place. And so I can only have 30 people come. So I do think it's going to sell out. So mark your calendars, save your money, get ready. And you can buy your airline tickets if you want to already, because I am going to have it, and I'm going to have it on that date. We are going to study death, and I'm going to show you Anne Boleyn's death chart. It's quite sad. But right now, let's do the composite chart. This composite chart is just, I don't know, it just kind of breaks my heart for me, for them, for her. The reason why it breaks my heart is because they cannot get away from the South Node. It doesn't matter how hard they try. They cannot get away from having an unhealthy, sick, jealous relationship that the whole world can see. The whole entire world was involved in this marriage. They were a very highly publicized couple. They had this Pisces moon by composite. This is the relationship, and it's straddling the 8th house of death in an exact square to the nodes. That is very, very painful, and that is emotional death, emotional heartbreak. The sun and the moon are also square. The heart could not be satisfied or fulfilled. Neptune opposing Mars, I also feel like that is very, very painful. This Neptune in the 5th house wants to be creative, wants to show its creativity, but with Mars coming at it, this is like a dagger into the spiritual or the creative, maybe her practice of magic, this Neptune is retrograde. And so there is no expression allowed. Your expression is severed, it is cut off. And your Neptunian creativity, your Neptune energy is not to be spoken of. It will wound you. It will be cut off. And also, this is the relationship to children. Queen Elizabeth I probably didn't really even get to understand or know her parents very well. They're Neptune in Capricorn. So while they are strong leaders, right? The CEO, the king, the royalty, they're ethereal. They evaporated. They were in the vapors. They were unavailable. And Pluto, Saturn. So we are going to be authoritarians. We are going to be dictators. We are going to suppress, control, and eventually kill you for what you think and what you say, right? You will be punished around what you think and what you say. She died for it, and he killed her. Saturn, Pluto, and Scorpio in the 3rd house. Definitely don't say the wrong thing. This is about power, domination, and control. I also find it interesting that Uranus is square Saturn and Pluto. So that is quite angry and volatile and like feeling like you are struck by lightning, unpredictable, abusive when it goes wrong. So their composite chart is ruled by communication, Cancer, Mercury in the 11th, attached to Chiron. What you think and what you say and who you talk to, right, will wound you. And it's also conjunct Mars and ultimately kill you. This is a very painful composite chart. Now, this is what I want you guys to think about. And when you get your composite chart or your composite package, which I really recommend you get your composite package in my shop, shopsoulnavigation.com. I'll put a link in the notes below in the description. I want you to start looking at it as an individual chart because this is what the two of them created. But then what you do is you make a bi-wheel, and I have a bi-wheel package. So in this case, we have Anne Boleyn on the inside and we have the relationship on the outside because we want to see what this relationship actually did to her. Her Jupiter in Leo by composite, right? In the house of the divine, spirituality, heaven and God and faith. Jupiter in Leo in the 12th house is deeply spiritual. And she, through this relationship gave her a gargantuan desire or need for faith. That's also, the 12th house is also the Tower of London. So being imprisoned basically for her mere essence, her life force energy, her soul, that's Leo. Leo is ruled by the sun just for her mere essence. And for her beliefs. So Anne Boleyn disapproved of Thomas Cromwell's dispersion of wealth through the monasteries. And while they liked each other at first, they both were the right and left hand of Henry. And they had quite a competition and a disagreement. Ultimately, he won in the end because the execution. Anyways, she was basically murdered for being kind of a big mouth about her beliefs and what she felt was right and wrong. And so they made up lies about her. If you think about it, she died by words, by what Henry VIII said about her, by rumor and by gossip and by untruths. She wasn't caught. Nobody ever caught her in the act of fornicating with her brother or his pages. It was just all spoken, gossip and rumor. She was canceled. That's Gemini. That's Gemini. And he got a consensus to believe the lies to then murder her. With Uranus in the 8th house, I think her death was a total shocking to herself and to the world. How painful is it that she has the moon, the composite moon, on her Uranus, almost exact in the house of death? I mean, what the hell? Look at this Neptune on the North Node in the 5th house. She was also executed for fabrications, basically made up lies. That's Neptune in the 5th house around love affairs. I think she had too much fun at court. She liked to dance. She liked the arts. She loved having love and living life to the fullest. I don't think Henry could handle that. Mars conjunct the South Node in the 11th. It's absolutely brutal. That doesn't have to be a death aspect, but that can be extraordinarily painful if the relationship isn't a healthy one, and they have it by composite. So that's sort of lethal. I also find it fascinating that this Saturn-Pluto by composite is straddling. It is straddling the IC. That is very, very treacherous and dangerous and awful. And guess what it does? This is probably the most potent thing. It opposes her sun in the 10th house. This is underground. This is, if there's a graveyard in the chart, it's the 4th house. It's where the roots live, with a tree. It is literally underground. And here we have Saturn, Pluto opposing her sun. Am I surprised that this relationship killed her? They didn't want her in the public spotlight. She was too beautiful for her own good. She was probably too smart. She spoke unfiltered. She had a joy for life and living life to the fullest, which Henry was jealous of. It's all quite petty. Moon Uranus in the 8th. It's very, very petty. And I do think that she was beloved. Venus on her Mars. I honestly think people from around the world really, really loved her. And together they were just the power couple. Wow. And again, we can't get away from the treachery of this South Node. This South Node by composite is just so painful, even in her own chart, because it's exact square to her Uranus. It's an exact square to her Uranus in the 8th house. Let's look at King Henry, the composite chart with him. The South Node on his Jupiter, almost exact, opposing his Neptune. He had no boundaries, literally no boundaries. A glutton with wine. He gave himself gout. He changed the laws as he wished. With the South Node on Jupiter, it made him kind of an arrogant bastard. And then he had the Mars, so this relationship empowered him into his arrogance. And he banished his first wife and got a divorce from her. That was bad enough, but at least she got to live in a castle for the rest of her life. He publicly executed this woman and went on to marry 4 more times. It's repugnant. It boils my blood. And this is in the how many hundreds of years ago. And so when I looked at the astrology, I was just like, holy God almighty. So here's Mars on the sun. Well, Mars on the sun is so cutting. It's so brutal. If you're not healthy, this never goes well. You have to be exceptionally healthy. You have to be mindful and thoughtful to execute a good Mars on the sun. This is just annihilation. Wounds will come through words. Words will wound. Chiron Mercury. And that's what happened. Those wounding words are on his identity. And this is what he's known for, the brutal murders of his wives. The whole thing is bad because the sun in the composite, so the energy inside the relationship is square to his rising sign. For whatever reason, he's uncomfortable. He doesn't like what this relationship is doing for him in his life. And he feels humiliated by it. Why? Because it's Virgo rising. Probably because he didn't get his son. He just got one of the most powerful women in the world. He didn't know that. He didn't live long enough to know that. And the sun is also opposing their North Node. So neither one of them can find their best selves in this relationship. But the sun is opposing his Neptune in the fourth house. And so he is just delusional, right? And he's kind of arrogant in that which he wishes for with his family, but he's just absolutely delusional. The composite sun is square to Mars. So Mars is just in this really giant place in the chart, not doing too well because he's not healthy enough. Look at Mercury opposing Saturn, just such a mean and cruel person. This was a relationship, as sad as it was, that had a lot of fate and destiny in it. Let's look at Anne Boleyn's beheading. Here's her chart. Her execution was scheduled for 9 a.m. and I figured it took her 10 minutes to walk there and get set up. It could have been a few minutes later. I don't know what time she was actually beheaded, but it was scheduled for 9 a.m. So maybe it was 9:20. Every single event in your life has a birth chart, even your death. When we study death, I will be taking death charts and I will be looking at them in Synastry in a bi-wheel, the person's natal chart. But let's just look at her death chart as a natal chart, right? Because it is in an odd way. It's when her soul is free and it's a new kind of birth, but we call it a death. One of the very interesting things here is the sun is practically unaspected with the exception of Uranus. And Uranus is just shell-shocking. It's like out of the blue, shocking. And that's in a sextile. Sun sextile Uranus in the 12th. The 12th house can also be a house of loss and death. If you think about it, the Ceres conjunct the moon in Capricorn right there, opposing that Uranus, they took her motherhood away from her. They orphaned her child. People don't look at it from that perspective very often. With Mars and Saturn conjunct the ascendant, something went terribly wrong, right? That can be a death and a murder and a blow to the head. I mean, Mars and Saturn can be death in a chart, and there it is, right there on the ascendant. And Venus is on Chiron, wounded from love, wounded from marriage, in a trine to this. That man loved her wrong. Neptune and Jupiter, that is also very, very sad because that's usually a magical and deeply spiritual aspect. And that is also in a very wide trine to this, death for her belief system. It's a trine. So I think this could be the Neptune, Jupiter, actually, the words that she spoke right before she died. And she developed a deep faith, because this is definitely a divine connection and faith. Pluto opposing the ascendant by 1 degree. That is literally just like a bullet. It wasn't. If it was a sword. Pluto retrograde, 7 degrees. Pluto opposing Mars and Saturn and her ascendant. This death chart has a lot of death in it. This is the synastry. So when we do look at an event, like you should do this with your wedding chart. You should do this with your first date chart. You should do this with, your mom's chart and your mom's death chart, just to understand what the last moments of their life was like, to understand the profound impact, if you will, of the exit. So here's a couple of things. One, she died almost near to her birthday. And so the sun was conjunct. So she was supposed to be living her best life. The sun had returned to the place that it was. And she spent her birthday in the Tower of London, knowing that she was going to be killed in just 4 days' time. Mercury on Mars, that is exact. Literally, her words spoken, her last words spoken, had enormous, enormous impact. And they were considered and still are quite inspiring. The 9th house is the house of the guru. And she has Venus there too. She was having a Venus return. And Neptune and Jupiter in the 8th house. So developing a faith and trying to overcome the fear of dying. Being able to actually sit there and weep for herself, for not getting to love herself or love her life anymore. Coming to an end, that almost makes me cry. The beheading here, look at that. It's in her 12th house of alienation, aloneness, and being in the dungeon. It's almost like she died in the tower before she was beheaded. Uranus on the south node, exact. You guys, is this shell-shocking? Are you just shell-shocked? Is your jaw on the floor. I mean, even if my times are a little bit off, that Uranus is not going to be off her south node. So that's being sort of struck down by lightning. That's probably what it felt like when she died. Oh, that is just so painful. And then the moon, which is the ruler of that Uranus. Are you following me? So watch this video called How to Find Your Chart Ruler. And so Uranus is in Cancer on the day that she was beheaded, and it's on her south node. So that means like terrible things can happen to you, obviously. I always say be careful if Uranus is on your south node, because your past and your past life, if you will, is coming up to be reevaluated. It's opposing the moon. It's literally opposing her heart. She did not want to die, and she was loved. And the moon is on her north node. I almost wonder if she became more famous because of her death with this chart. She became more famous than she would have become had she just endured this marriage, had she just lived, because she is absolutely loved in her death with that moon on the north node and Uranus on the south node, leaving a very, very deep emotional imprint on the world. And I'm not doing a full reading, so I might have missed some transits. I'm just doing a cold reading. By the way, I haven't even looked at these charts in great detail. I just saw a couple of things and I'm like, I'm going to do a cold reading for my followers and for viewers. And I just really am looking at this in more depth with you. Let's look at the day. Oh my God. Okay, I have never done this particular chart, but oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I can barely handle it. So look at this chart. I am just dumbfounded. So we don't need to say a lot, but this is the day that King Henry VIII ordered the execution and the beheading of his wife, Anne Boleyn, on May 19th, 1536 at 9:20 in the morning. And look at where the stellium of planets are in his chart, in the house of death. He got off on this death. Jupiter and Venus there, and Neptune. It's like, I'm free, woo. And then I think he got married to someone else 10 days later. I mean, he couldn't wait for this to happen. Mars is on his Mercury, Mars and Saturn, but it's straddling that 12th house. What a sicko. Truthfully, the south node is on his Neptune. He was delusional, emotionally reckless with the moon on Uranus. It's like emotionally hot-headed, emotionally reckless, my way or the highway. Look at the moon is straddling the 4th and 5th house. And the 5th house is the house of the self. It's the ego house. It is the house of joy, but because his Uranus is there, he wanted to make it go away fast. The sun, I can't make this up. I mean, this astrology is I've been a professional astrologer for 23 years and my mind is blown away. Just more and more and more with each one of these charts today with this series of charts. So the sun on the south node, that is the sun lighting up his garbage, lighting up his sewage, lighting up everything that's wrong with him. So he can go and be free to love Gemini, the second person, the third person, the next person. And Mercury on Chiron. He didn't give two flying squirrels who he wounded or who he hurt. And if his words hurt, so be it. And there's so much more here. Absolutely horrifying. I also have to show you one more thing. So on the day that Anne Boleyn was beheaded, Pluto was the only planet, I believe, that was out of bounds. And you can see the out of bounds planet right down here. Out of bounds planets are when the declination, not the degrees, the declination, because you need to know what planets of yours are out of bounds. And again, it's not the degrees in the wheel, it is declination. And so Pluto is at 2452. And anything higher than 2327 is considered out of bounds. But I just wanted to show you that death was off the chart. Why was Anne Boleyn so smart? Well, when we look at her chart, she had an out of bounds Mercury. So she spoke out of turn. She had Mercury in Gemini. She probably didn't shut up when she should, obviously. And she probably was too damn smart for her own good. So the last thing I really want to show you is, if you guys want to understand your composites, just go here to Shop Soul Navigation. And you can go and look at all of my composite reports and charts. We have tons of them. And you can get the composite package. It's really, really good for you. You can get your bi-wheel package, your composite bi-wheel, which is what I just showed you in this. And you can also get a tri-wheel composite chart. And that is so interesting. It looks like this. So if we were to take these three, we would do Anne Boleyn's natal. then we would do King Henry, and then we would do the composite on the outside. It's a lot to look at, but you can see how the relationship affects both people. And that is it's just so exciting, and it's a shortcut. So if that's too much for you to look at, you could just do the bi-wheel package, and you would get his natal with your composite and your natal with your composite, the bi-wheel package or the tri-wheel composite chart. You save a little bit of money with the tri-wheel, but it might be harder for you to read if you're still a basic student, but it is just invaluable. Also, we offer the Lovers tri-wheel, and the Lovers bi-wheel. And so with that, we give you the 3 love asteroids. So we give you Psyche, Eros, and Cupido. If you buy the composite package, you get a report that interprets your composite chart. So I don't know about you, but I absolutely love and adore doing these relationship readings where you can just see the energy and you can see the story. You can see the deception with Neptune. You can see the out of bounds Mercury, right? And how she was born ahead of her time. You can see his cruelty. And then the death day was just horrifying to look at. You can see that they can't get away from the horror in their composite chart. The story is just unbelievable. Is there another couple you would like for me to look at like this? Tell me if you've got any ideas on another couple, a true crime, or another relationship, or another, kind of sick person, and we can look at it through the astrological lens. I hope you got something wonderful out of this. I hope I get to see you all, if not in Seattle, then in Spain. And mark your calendars. Please feel free to write us if you have any questions about the retreat. And also, I want to invite you to become a member, because I do members only content and videos, and I'm doing live cold readings just like this every single month now, and I am drawing names from my members. So if you've sat through this whole video with me, thank you for being here. Thank you for subscribing, liking our content. And from my house here in Seattle, Washington, to wherever you live at in the world, I wish you just the very, very best. Take good care. Bye for now.